year, right? Or fifth
I
year?
think fifth year. Yeah.
Yeah, should have made sure I had my facts
It's
straight.
okay. It's okay.
Um, this is a program that starts students from the beginning, right? There's, as opposed to our youth ensembles program, which has students with a bit more experience all the way up to quite a lot of experience, kind of almost, pre-college, pre-conservatory levels. So what's the overall methodology, guiding methodology at the Sturgis Academy, Catherine?
So, both Joe and I use mainly Suzuki with added um, other methodology included there, but the basic philosophy is really every child can, right? And I like to take that everyone can. You don't have to be a child, right? I really firmly do believe that if you want to enough, anyone can learn an instrument at any age. Maybe you won't be able to get as far if you start when you're 64 versus when you're 3, but you still can learn. So that's the philosophy that every child can. And we have I think, what, 48 students right now that we're all teaching virtually. It's myself, Miss Joe, Joanna Klett. I'm so used to saying Miss Joe. And Timothy Macduff is also a teacher for us. He is a fantastic viola player. He plays in the Quapaw String Quartet and is one of the Arkansas Symphony's full-time musicians. And so we're teaching one private lesson a week and then one group class a week, but it's expected that everyone is practicing every day and listening to the CD that accompanies the book. And I also like to try to encourage students to just listen to as much music as possible. Not just classical, I mean, a lot of classical, but just to listen as much as possible, because what you're trying to do, and again, not just with children, but when you're trying to learn a skill, you need to have immersion. That's my main belief system, is that in order to do something successfully, you have to kind of do it all the time. It's just like learning language, basically, and that's what Suzuki based his methodology off of, is how do we learn language? By listening.
So what is the Suzuki method, and how does it differ from
So
just signing up at the corner for
right.
violin lessons?
Um, it's mainly this listening component, which kind of distinguishes it from others. And you don't immediately start to read the music. I actually start pretty early, especially if a student's really catching on. I will supplement with a sight reading book very, very, very early on. It's called I Can Read Music. It's great. Does that kind of answer your question?
I think so. I mean, but there's also a component kind of more specific to the parents as well in
Oh
terms
yes,
of
yes, absolutely. Like
yes.
the we talk about it as the Suzuki triangle. So you have the teacher and then the parent and the student, and essentially the it's understood that the parent is the teacher at home, because we can't be there every day with the child. So it's absolutely essential that the parent is, especially for a young student, that the parent is turning on the CD, the parent is practicing with the student, the parent can identify mistakes when they're made and correct them. And this can be adjusted with an older student so that it's like a two-sided triangle. Absolutely.
Does that ever come as a surprise to parents?
Honestly, sometimes, but people kind of usually know what they're signing up for, especially with such a young kid. It's pretty rare to have a 5-year-old on Zoom with just me and no parent there, or in person, also.
And is that the recommended age for starting?
Again, you can start at any time. I would like to start as early as possible, and I eventually would like to add, uh, like baby class to Sturgis, um, which is literally like 6-month-old people drumming.
Mhm.
I think it starts as early as you possibly can.
Now, are the group classes that Sturgis Academy, so everyone has a weekly lesson, they practice at home, also with, overseen by a parent, and they listen to everything that they're playing. Um, how does group class fit into that? What is the role of group class in
The
music
role
education?
of group class is encouragement mainly. I think it's oh, this kid is doing this thing, I'm going to also do this thing. It's sometimes hard to just do something by yourself, and that's what we spend most of our lives doing, right? Is being in a room alone practicing. So the group component is almost extra important for this kind of solitary activity, because it really gives you that encouragement and that sense of community. And also, you obviously, we start to learn how to play music together, which is I think for most people, the ultimate goal. So just building really early ensemble skills, but at this level, honestly, it's mainly just, oh, Jimmy's doing this thing, I want to do it too. Or and sometimes it's good to help to help facilitate quick progress, because you do get a little competitive aspect in there too.
I was about to say, it sounds like you're talking about a bit of healthy competition.
A little bit, which is good. I'm sure, but I'm sure that Joe has things to add to that as well.
No, I think that that sense of community and learning from each other, and then over the summer at our online Sturgis, or well, we also opened it up to ASYO kids, but I had one student. There's many gavottes in the Suzuki repertoire, and I had a student working on a gavotte in book 2, and another student working on a gavotte in book 3, and this one student was like, this other person, it's a different gavotte. I want to play his gavotte. And so I have a student in book 2 definitely already trying to figure out this piece in book 3, and he's getting it.
That's
So
awesome. A very similar thing happened at a lesson I was teaching on Monday this week, and she's like, I've played a beret before, but this doesn't sound anything like it. And I was like, well, you play piano too, right? She's like, yeah. I was like, that's a different beret.
Right. And then that goes to, well, what is a beret?
Exactly.
And then we're all
dancing lesson. Yeah.
no. Well, I'll just pause for just a moment to invite our audience. Please submit your questions. We'd love to do Q&A. Anything you'd like to know, expand on what we're talking about, or anything having to do with teaching music or ASO's education programs, just drop a question into the comments if you're listening on Facebook or on YouTube or on the ASO's website, and we'll be happy to get to that. So, in talking about these group activities and how that kind of inspires maybe a little bit of, competition, but also allows students to achieve or to see baby goals in front of them, right? Like the next level, not just, the YouTube star or whomever it may be, but like, this is where I could be a month from now. That brought immediately to my mind something, Katherine, you said to me when we were just talking over just before this, what we were going to, where we were going to go with this conversation. That was the idea of creating a culture of practice and routine. Would you say that the group classes, or either of you, would you say that the group classes, play into that? And how does that continue to build? Like we've been talking about the little babies, the 4 and 5 year olds, soon these kids are 10, 11, 12, and they're playing in orchestras, and, soon they're, after that, they're going to college, and then they're, auditioning for the Arkansas Symphony. And so in terms of like starting that community from the very bottom, like, I don't know, maybe each of you, maybe Joe first and then Katherine, like, what does that culture of practice and routine sort of look like?
Well, I think it gives us some accountability too. You know, if we're meeting weekly, we see if a lot of times we'll be working on maybe a certain technique, or I'll have kids be playing a certain piece, and they see their progress, but then they also know that they're going to be performing for their colleagues, and so I think it gives them some motivation. It's hard sometimes. We know we need to practice, but if we don't have maybe something that we're preparing for, it's easy to kind of not push ourselves. But if we know that we're going to be performing for our peers, it kind of motivates us to show them what we've accomplished over the week.
So Katherine, is the secret to building that to just the more people are doing it, the more successful it is? Or is there a mindset that we teach, or is it just, building competition, or what is it that we're trying to accomplish there?
I mean, hopefully the person that you're most competitive with ultimately is yourself, right? But I absolutely, everything that Joe just said about accountability is where it starts with Sturgis, I would say. And something, and Joe mentioned over the summer on Zoom, we had this practice camp, and we were all a part of it. Jeff was practicing online in a Zoom screen, and Joe was practicing online in a Zoom screen, and I was there online practicing in a Zoom screen. And some of our youngest students were there. We had a couple of 5-year-olds join our Zoom practice camp. We had students, I would say most of the Sturgis students were maybe between 7 to 11. Does that feel like an appropriate range, Joe? And
Yeah.
then we had some older students on there. And so the younger kids were not only seeing maybe some of their classmates, but they were also seeing some advanced kids who were maybe looking like they were playing really, really fast on the screen. And it was like, oh, I wonder if I can do that someday. Um, but really it's about where you want to go with it, and understanding that if you don't put in the work, you're gonna get there a lot slower. And another thing that we did this past spring before COVID, we had a 30 days of practice challenge, and everyone had a little grid that they'd have to put. Some of them were assigned different things. If there was a student that, just an example, like I have some students that don't really practice very much, and so I told them, okay, you not just a sticker in your little practice chart box, but I need you to put in how much time you practiced in each one of these boxes. And the kids who completed that chart got a little prize at the end of it. But the ultimate prize is that they actually were able to see, oh, I finally got through that song, you know. Um, and that's what we're trying. That's what we're trying to see. It's yes, the external competition does help, but it's really like, oh, what can I do? That's my goal. But sometimes we need these other things to help incentivize.
Well, I feel like, the talk about the Zoom practice camp and seeing younger and older kids working together and makes me think about some of the kind of mentorship programs we've set up in the youth orchestra where, with us leading by example, and then we kind of teach some of the older kids a little bit about how to teach and kind of using the teaching of music to build leadership skills, which I think is something that's critical for, obviously when they go off into any field, everyone's not going to be a professional musician, but everyone needs communication skills and leadership skills and concentration and, perseverance and all of the things that go along with learning how to play an instrument. But do you ever have any older students directly involved in any Sturgis programs?
Definitely not so much right now because of COVID. But actually, one of our wonderful Sturgis helpers, Harmony Skinner, is in our top youth orchestra, and she's just delightful. And everyone is always asking, like, how's Miss Harmony doing? And she's just a wonderful example. She would come with me to so Sturgis has, yes, this private academy, where we're teaching individual lessons once a week and the group classes once a week, but we also have a violin program in public schools throughout the district. And when we were in person, Miss Joe came with me sometimes to these schools to play piano and to help me set up the violins and tune them and to position the posture correctly and all sorts of things like that. And some of our youth orchestra members would also come along with me. And once Harmony brought her sister along, and they played a duet for one of our classes at Carver Elementary, and it was a piece that some of those kids couldn't even really fathom, and it was definitely the thing that they talked about most, was getting to see someone like Harmony. And there are so many, I'm just using Harmony as an example because she came with us a lot and I miss her, but there are so many wonderful youth orchestra members who I would love to have on board with Sturgis and who have been on board with us. So yeah, definitely playing a critical role, but I would love to see more of them involved in the future.
Well, I definitely want to pivot to our work in schools directly, but there's a great question, actually, that would be fun to talk about for a moment. What's the best way to get started? If Catherine, you mentioned that you believe it's possible to start at any age to play an instrument, and I believe that too. Um, what's what's the best approach if you say are not a great reader of music, you are a great lover of music, and you played a little bit in growing up. But where do what's the way to start potentially if you want to learn the violin?
Well, and I would love to hear what Joe has to say about this because I think, Joe, you have a little bit more experience teaching adults than I do. But I would say something that I've noticed, and I don't mean for this to sound any which way, but I think that what I've noticed with adults and even older, like high school students, is that you need to adjust your expectation because you kind of know what it could be at that point, right? And you want to sound like Heifetz or you want to sound like Rubinstein, but you're not going to. And that's okay. So I think the number one step before you even find a teacher or start to try to read music again is to just kind of realize this might take some time and that's okay. And starting from that mindset, because yes, reading music is a challenge, but so was reading a book when you first started. So you have to be very, 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 very kind to yourself. And I know this sounds elementary, but I would literally treat yourself like you are 3 years old in your brain because you need that. And that's not just for music, that's for learning any new skill. I think as an older person, you have to be very, very kind with yourself and adjust your expectations accordingly.
I would say and have a goal, right? Like I want to learn to play the violin, but what do I want to learn to play on the violin?
Yeah.
Because if you want to learn how to play a couple Irish fiddle tunes, maybe you don't need to read music. There's also lots of music where we don't rely on the printed page, and I'm often trying to coax kids away from the printed page. It becomes a crutch at times, and so depending on what your goals are, that might not have to be a barrier. Joe, what do you think?
No, I definitely agree with Catherine, and I've actually told many of my adult students it's like you're an adult with certain expectations, and it's like you know what you're capable of, but as a musician or as you take on this new instrument, I tell them you are a baby, so it's like you're learning to crawl, you're learning to roll over, you're learning all these physical aspects of a new instrument, and it does take a lot of time. But I think being very open with what goals you the adult student have, and then finding a teacher that will kind of work with those goals, because again it may be reading music, it may be playing a fiddle tune, it may be grasping the instrument enough to be able to play chamber music with others. It kind of depends, I think.
Do you have any suggestions about how someone might go about finding a teacher? If they, if you're an adult and you're looking to kind of start something new, it might be easier to call around teachers on your kids' behalf than on your own behalf, right? Where are there any? I think the symphony is of course a resource. There's information on the webpage about finding a teacher. But any other places to look?
I mean, I would definitely start with that list that's on the symphony website. I believe that there are maybe asterisks or there's some indication of who teaches and who you could contact on the symphony website. Also, the Little Rock Violin Shop would be a great resource. They have many, many names as well. And to just be open about, again, as we've all been saying, be open about your goals and what you want, and hopefully you'll be able to find someone. Yeah.
Well, that was great. Thank you for your input on that. We have a great question from a pre-K teacher who's asked us any advice for classroom teachers to incorporate more music into the classroom, and I think that will serve as a great segue into talking about some of our programs in schools. So maybe I'll toss that one to you first, Joe, and we'll kind of take the conversation from there.
I think for really young kids, and again, I don't have a lot of experience in classroom teaching, but for younger kids, I think rhythm is a great way to start that process of feeling the beat or feeling music, and then kind of branching out from there in terms of that part of the question. Programs in the schools, we have two full-time string quartets. We have the Rockefeller Quartet and the Quapaw Quartet. And right now we're not able to be in schools, but we are starting live stream programs to the schools. And I can read off those programs. We have Meet the String Family, Celebrating Arkansas Composers, The Math Behind the Music, and then Telling Stories Through Music. So each of those programs have kind of a central theme, and then it's introducing not only the instruments of the quartet, but kind of the roles they serve in changing music.
And these programs, these live stream programs, are performed by the ASO's resident string quartets.
Yes.
Typically, they would go into the schools to give these performances. Have you found it, have you found it difficult this year, like staying connected to schools? And is there, like, I mean, obviously we feel that our role and what we do help to do to enhance school music programs is critical. We've done, as a lot of virtual work, but kind of where do we see things going from here? Are we going to just kind of jump back into where we were, or do we think we have new opportunities from what we've learned doing digital stuff during the COVID era? Or what do we think is going to happen next?
I mean, I can't wait to be back in schools personally, and to be in the same room as my kids. But I think I've definitely gained some tools or knowledge of tools when it comes to making videos or sharing videos, whether it's instructional or things that they can play along with. So I think after COVID, I think it would be great to still incorporate some of what we've started doing during COVID. I think it's a different way to stay connected. It's not ideal, but there are some, you can get a video out to a kid much sooner than in person, but I still miss that personal connection a lot.
Absolutely, yeah, totally agree with that. But I think we can keep in mind, I mean, something that Joe and I have been talking about since the beginning of this is, okay, what are some positive things that we can take from this time? And just that realization, oh, we can be in 5,000 places at once now. Which is great. And maybe there's a school that we wouldn't be able to reach anyhow, or something that's happened with the symphony during this time is not just reaching people in the state. So maybe we could continue to expand in that regard as well. Or this also, I also cannot wait to start teaching in person. But we know how to do this now, and if there's an extenuating circumstance and someone absolutely needs to have an online lesson, it can happen now.
It'd be easy, right? Yeah. And I think we've all been pleasantly surprised, to be honest, as string players. It's been sort of eye-opening to realize how much teaching is purely visual, right? Like we hear our students over Zoom, and of course it doesn't, we don't really, you can't necessarily hear the nuances of tone and everything, but we play instruments that are so visual that we really can almost see how it sounds. Would you agree with that? And I wonder whether that kind of extrapolates into, that's why the visual element is so important when we do start playing in a group as well. And I wonder if they're related.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I like to play games with my students where I'll mute myself and I'll play something, and I'll, maybe if we're learning dynamics or something, and I'll ask them, okay, am I playing loud or soft? And then how can you tell? And it's the same. So it's kind of, yes, absolutely. As a teacher, from that perspective, we can see very clearly, oh, move your bow here, move your finger here, it'll get this sound. But then also, making the student become the teacher as well, so that they understand from that perspective too, and using technology both directions.
So Drew Irvin, our your stand partner in orchestra, Catherine, and our beloved concertmaster of the orchestra, wants to know, what's the cutest or funniest thing a student has said or done? I'm sure it's hard to narrow down.
I have a couple. I have a 5-year-old cello student, and when we first start with the cello bow hold, we hold the thumb on the outside of the frog, and then gradually work the thumb in. And during one lesson, we were doing there's a whole bow hold setup that we go through, and she had it set up beautiful, absolutely beautiful, with the thumb in the correct spot, and she's like, "This rocks." I was like, yes, yes, it does.
So cute.
That's wonderful. Well, actually, that kind of brings to my memory that I believe one of you guys has a little video of a Sturgis activity, Sturgis Music Academy activity that you might be able to share with us.
Could we share both of them? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So usually on these brown bag lunches, there's some sort of musical moment or some sort of short performance when we're doing these, when they're live or virtual, and so yeah, I think it would be a great time for that. So maybe introduce it and then we'll hear it.
Great. So we thought it might be interesting for you to kind of see two different sides of the academy. I'm going to share just a clip from one of my in-school group classes. So these students, they're at Meadowcliff Elementary, and they just started in September, or maybe in October, September, October. And this is a little clip of us kind of composing a song together. It's a little hard to hear sometimes, but we decided that at the end of this clip that this song is called The Nature Song by the Meadowcliff Mustangs. Okay, so you're gonna hear a little bit of an intro situation. And I have the capacity to share here, right? Okay.
Sure.
Okay, great. Hi everybody, I'm here with the Meadowcliff Violin class of 2020. I want to wave. Hello! We have been having so much fun together, and we have even created a little song. The words to the song are by Anaya, and the rhythm is by Isla, and they are both in that top corner. Guys want to wave? Great. So Anaya, you want to take it away for us?
Okay, so the lyrics are, me and the bees are here together. The flies and the birds are in the cool air. We come together and enjoy the weather. We come as one and show that we care. 1, 2, 3, 4. Me and the bees I love to play the violin.
So there's a little clip.
I love that because it's about so much more than just playing the violin, right?
Oh,
there are so many critical skills that were being kind of cultivated through an activity like that. So
their assignment was to come up with their own rhythm and then to come up with lyrics once we decided on what rhythm to learn, to use. Yeah, just trying to incorporate different, getting people excited in whatever way.
I just think that exemplifies, how important the study of music can be for every aspect of, a child's development, and really makes the point strongly. I love that. So there were two.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm just excited now. I haven't seen
Ooh, I want to make my own song now. This video is from my intermediate cello class. These are kids that are all roughly in book 2 of the Suzuki repertoire. And this was our October group piece. Here we go.
Oh, they're so cute.
So that's been one new thing that I've definitely had to learn, how to best have kids play together. So in talking to my husband, who knows much more about this than I do, I would make a reference track, and then the students would practice with that. And then you'll notice they're all wearing earbuds or headphones, so they're listening to that reference track while they're recording their part. And then most of the time it lines up when you put it into Audacity or whatever other editing program. So, and
So
my
what,
husband put that together. So
it looked great. Yeah, great work. So what comes next after the intermediate class? Like, so those students have been playing for 2 years, is that right?
roughly, yeah, probably 2 or 3. And then I have an advanced class that's book 3, book 4, and that ranges in age actually from like 4th, 5th grade all the way through high school. Some beginning high school kids.
So, and then the idea there is that gets them well into their school music program
Oh yes, definitely.
era, right?
And several kids are in the ASYO program as well.
Yeah, we've definitely started to see students from Sturgis Academy enter the youth orchestras, youth ensembles program, and so, you know, kind of speaks to our goal, I guess, of having the system that can help kids carry through all the way, you know, all the way through school, basically, and of course, always in conjunction with school music programs, which are a absolutely critical part of, you know, of forming these skill sets as well. Um, this is a good question and actually a good time for it. How obvious is the variance in the quality of instruments at the beginning level? Do Sturgis Academy students have their own instruments, or does Sturgis Academy provide instruments? What's the how does that work for kids?
Yeah, so it depending upon like what sect of Sturgis you're involved in. Many of our private students do rent from the Little Rock Violin Shop, but the symphony does own some instruments that are also available for rent. Most of those last year, when we were in person, did go towards students learning in the schools through a grant that we received. So almost all of those instruments were used for that purpose. If that kind of answers the question. But a lot of these, especially for younger students, these instruments are very, very small, and it is absolutely crucial that it's a good instrument. But it doesn't need to be like a Stradivarius when you're playing on a 1/10 size. So, but as students do get more advanced and start to enjoy it more, and I would say that's a good time to maybe consider, even if it's not a full-size instrument, to consider getting a better one if your child really loves it and can hear that there's a difference in sound quality. That really does make a huge difference in their enjoyment and even in their wanting to continue.
I think that's a great point, because we talk about making a good sound, right, all the time, and we're trying to teach students this sort of critical thinking, like, does this sound good or does this sound not good, and why? And you know, and so the instrument can be can be a barrier there, and So I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm glad that the Academy also has instruments that students can use, so that acquiring a beginning instrument is not in and of itself a barrier
Exactly.
for our students.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I've seen you leave the parking lot of our offices with about 60 violins coming out of the back
Yeah,
of your car.
I tend to do that. I have this lovely little hatchback, and I'll just kind of back in and see how many I can fit in there. It's fun.
That's why we have hatchbacks, I thought.
Exactly.
To see how many instruments we can
Yeah,
cram.
I think, Joe, we got like, I think the most that I've had in my car at once was probably like 32. Yeah.
Most entertaining unloading. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And Joe has helped me on numerous occasions, so thank you kindly. Yes, I cannot wait for the day when we can actually be back in the school and I can deliver 45,000 instruments again. 'Cause those were the days.
And does everybody start on violin, or can you start on cello?
You can definitely start on cello. So I know this is kind of confusing because there's a couple different programs within Sturgis, but there's a violin in your school program where, and I'm just going to speak pandemic aside for now. So that was third and fourth grade students at Bale Elementary were getting one lesson a week, and this violin stayed at the school. And a few other schools were also involved with that. Again, just one lesson a week, and violins would stay at their school. And then a couple of other schools where the child would rent their own violin and they would have it at home, but just one group class per week. But then our private Sturgis Academy is cello lessons and violin lessons, and we do start on cello. I would love to add viola someday soon, especially now that we have, well, yes, our founding director, Dr. Wu, was a fantastic violist as well, and she and I had talked about adding viola early on also. But for now, it's just violin and cello.
Let's see, how many cello students do you have, Joe?
Through Sturgis, I have 11.
11. It's a pretty good ensemble.
Oh yeah, and they range in age from 5 to 10th grade.
Mm-hmm. And I know you had told me, Joe, that that you had started actually on piano. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you recommend? Like, do you recommend to students that they study piano additionally, or what are your thoughts on that? Because I also started on piano, and I found it really helped me form understanding of how music worked.
I think it depends on the kid, but yeah, for me, I started out very young on piano, and a lot of how I understood music when I first picked up cello, which wasn't until the 8th grade, I almost kind of translated through piano in terms of just how I thought about notes or how notes relate. So I think study of piano is definitely very helpful when it comes to understanding harmony and melody. And several of my students do play piano, but it's not something I make mandatory, but I think it is incredibly helpful. Also for just dexterity, especially for younger kids, sometimes piano is helpful in just that hand-eye coordination too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wish that I had more piano study than I did as a young person. So, and a lot of my violin students do also take piano in addition to violin, but not through the academy. Similar to exactly the same as Joe, I don't require it. I mean, you never know what kind of expenses a family is dealing with, and it is an expense.
But if you are able to do it and you do end up going to college for music, you can get out of that pesky 8 a.m. keyboard skills class.
Yeah.
Or make some money accompanying. You just never know.
Exactly. That 100%. Well, we've got just a couple minutes left here. I guess if we have any final questions or any final thoughts from, maybe a final thought from each of you about, about the overall importance of music education, how the ASO is serving the public, and just the message we want to get out there to encourage people to practice and to and to be involved. Joe first. Joe.
I think the big thing about music and education in general, it's self-empowerment. And I think giving kids the tools to not only grow, but then discover. Um, that's why I teach.
Absolutely. I don't think I need to say anything else. That's perfect. But I would like to just a shameless plug here. Um, we have a few things to promote, I think, right?
Mhm.
The ASO has a holiday live streamed concert this Sunday at 3 p.m. from Robinson. So you will not be able to purchase a ticket to attend live, but you will be able to watch on Facebook for free, I believe. Is that correct? And Sturgis will be streaming our winter solo recital at 6 p.m. this Monday, December 14th, and will be followed at 7:30 by another virtual performance from the Academy Orchestra. And I think, Jeff, you have another youth concert coming up as well.
That'll be followed the following Monday by a virtual performance by the Arkansas Symphony Youth Orchestra, the oldest top level group in our youth ensembles. And we also have a live stream concert from one of the quartets, the Quapaw Quartet, live from Byrne Hall on Friday the 18th. And so there's lots going on. Definitely encourage everyone to stay connected to the symphony and our programming as we close out the year and the holiday season. And so, of course, Arkansas Symphony on Facebook, arkansasymphony.org, Arkansas Symphony on YouTube. It's all there. And of course, I'm so grateful to Joe and Katherine for joining me for a little conversation about teaching and music education at the Symphony. Thanks to Brandon Doris for providing the tech support to make all of our virtual performances happen. Couldn't do it without you. Thank you all for listening and for the questions, and we'll see you at our next virtual event. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Jeff.